As a leader, have you ever worked really hard to create and drive change on your team and nothing was really working? Well, this video may help give you a little bit of insight. Let's pretend for a second you're a new leader and you just completed your first 90 days. You spend that time observing and getting to know your team. Individually, you find each person to be highly capable. However, the team seems to always be busy but not especially effective. They do a great job at handling crisis, but not at preventing them. You also notice they consistently bring you problems but rarely recommend solutions. If you have or are currently experiencing any of these things, you're not alone, and it doesn't have to be this way. You may have already determined that this is culture, but I'd like to give you a few other things to consider. My name is Dr. Quinette Taylor. I'm an organizational development and human behavior expert. I started this channel to help leaders make sense of the environments they're responsible for and to provide them with tools and resources that further team and organizational effectiveness. So, back to your hypothetical team. You say you want them to be more results driven, proactive, and solutions oriented. Getting them there depends on you understanding that you are observing the manifestation of something much deeper. If someone comes to you with a fever, the high temp and discomfort is real, but the fever is not the illness. It's the body telling you that there's something deeper going on. And if you only treat the fever, you might feel better for a few hours, but you have not addressed what is actually making you sick. This is what is happening in many cases. We attempt to treat the fever. In my 20 years working inside organizations across industries, I have watched this play out more times than I can count. A leader sees a problem, low morale, missed deadlines, high turnover, and the instinct is to solve it and fast. That makes sense. You're paid to fix things, you're under pressure, you need momentum. But what you are looking at in the moment is almost never the root cause. It is the presenting problem and it's superficial. And if you solve only that, you'll be back to solving it a few months from now. It's a vicious cycle, but it can be broken. And here's where there are a lot of critical mistakes that are made when we look at certain patterns and we instantly identify them as culture. And it's understandable because culture is a word we reach for when something feels systemic, when it feels like it's baked into how people operate. But not everything that looks like culture is culture. And if you misdiagnose it, you might implement the wrong solutions. Here's one example I hear about regularly. The formal system, organizational values, statements, things like that, they say we value collaboration, but the informal system rewards individual heroics. Now, you might look at that and call it a culture problem, and you might be right, but because the pattern could be coming from several different places, it could be something else. Maybe it's a leadership problem. One manager who consistently spotlights the person who saves the day rather than the team that planned ahead. That's not culture. That is one person's impact on the environment. Maybe it's a design problem. The incentive structure literally rewards individual output. Workflows make collaboration inefficient or decision rights are unclear. So people default to working alone. Those structural problems are real, but they're not culture. And they will produce dysfunction whether the culture is healthy or not. Maybe it's a climate problem, meaning people currently perceive that the heroics get rewarded and planning ahead goes unnoticed. And that perception is shaping their behavior right now. Or maybe it has become culture, which means the group has really internalized the belief that this is just how things work here. And now they're teaching that belief to every new person who walks in the door. Those are very different root causes, and they lead to very different solutions and interventions. Culture is not every broken process, bad manager, or every instance of conflict. At the same time, it's not every company picnic, motivational poster, or team that gets along. Culture shapes how people interpret and respond to all of those things, but those things on their own are not automatically culture. They are conditions that can produce culture over time if they are reinforced long enough to become the norm. Climate is the environment you are creating right now. It is what people feel and experience every day. And that can look like fear, confusion, low trust, but it can also look like clarity, psychological safety, genuine accountability. Culture is internalized, and that cuts both ways too. It's when people stop questioning dysfunction because they have learned to expect it. Speaking up is dangerous. Protect yourself first. Speed matters more than quality. But it's also when collaboration, honesty, and high standards are so embedded that the team does not even recognize them as special anymore. It's just how we do things. We solve problems together here. New ideas are welcome here. We hold each other accountable and to high standards because we respect each other. Those are all cultural beliefs. Culture is what people have learned to believe is true. And that can be the thing that is holding your team back or making them unstoppable. People experience conditions as climate first, and over time, if those conditions persist, repeated climate solidifies into culture. And that difference matters in a practical way. If you are dealing with a climate problem, you are mostly trying to change the team's current lived experience, and you are making the environment feel and function differently. You are clarifying expectations, you're setting norms, building trust. You're also correcting bad behavior, resetting how meetings run. And if this is truly a climate issue, and you lead consistently, people will respond relatively quickly because the deeper assumptions have not been formed. Success here looks like behavior improving when conditions improve. Now, if you are dealing with a culture problem, you are trying to change the team's core beliefs. This means not just that people feel safer this month, but that people no longer believe that silence is smart or that self protection is necessary or that chaos is normal. Success here is not just better behavior in front of leadership. Success is that the team starts teaching a different reality to themselves and to new people on the team. So, how do you know whether you are changing climate or actually changing culture? The real question is whether the team owns the behavior or whether it still depends on you to hold it in the first place. If the team performs differently because you set clear expectations and you are consistently reinforcing them, that's climate work. That's not a small thing, but the behavior is still being held up by your presence and your consistency. If the team starts reinforcing the behavior themselves, if they are correcting each other, if they are teaching the new people how things work, and if they're choosing the new way even when no one is watching, then the team has taken ownership, and that is when you're getting into real culture change. Climate is the environment responding to you. Culture is the environment sustaining itself without you. And the reason I believe culture change efforts often stall or are altogether ineffective is because although culture gets named frequently as the thing to fix, it's so severely misunderstood. Everyone is talking about it, attempting to measure it, yet somehow it still feels like this vague, abstract thing that is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I don't think it's because culture is unknowable. I just think we just have to slow down long enough to understand exactly what culture is. If you have been overwhelmed by the culture conversation, if you have felt like it's too big or too vague to get your arms around, you're not wrong because this is complex work and it's embedded in everything. But let's wrap up by revisiting our hypothetical team one more time. What you are seeing on the surface is the visible stuff. The team is always busy, not effective. They handle crisis well, but they don't prevent them. They bring up problems. They don't offer solutions. The climate could be responsible, what people are currently experiencing. And that might look like no one knows what the priorities are, so everything feels urgent. There has been no expectation that people think beyond the immediate fire, and offered solutions to the previous managers were largely ignored. But underneath the climate is where you find cultural beliefs. And these sound like we are valued for how hard we work, but not for what we produce. Preventing problems is invisible work, and no one gets credit for it. It is not my place to bring an answer, just the problem. Otherwise, I'm overstepping. This is how it's always been. Everyone loves that one. At the surface level, you would start naming outcome expectations instead of activities. You would start recognizing the work that prevents the crisis, not just the work that responds to it. And when someone brings you a problem, ask them what they think the path forward should look like. Not to put them on the spot, but to show them that their thinking matters. To shift climate, you would get clear on priorities so your team can stop treating everything like it's equally urgent. Create the conditions where thinking ahead is expected and make it safe for people to offer solutions, even imperfect ones, without feeling like they're overstepping. But if you are dealing with true culture issues, those moves alone will not be enough. You would also need to be consistent long enough that the team starts to believe that the change is real because cultural beliefs do not shift just because a leader announces a new expectation. They shift when a team experiences that new expectation being reinforced over and over until it replaces what they used to believe was true. All right, before I let you go, here's your practical application for the week. I have a reflection tool linked in the description called the Team Culture and Climate Check. It is a simple guide that walks you through how to observe a pattern on your team, consider what might actually be driving it, and determine whether you are looking at a climate issue or something deeper before you decide what to do about it. It is not a diagnosis or a shortcut to certainty, but it's a way to slow yourself down before you act to avoid moving too fast on the wrong thing and potentially exerting the effort without producing much progress. If this information was helpful in the least, let's chat in the comments. Building the organization of the future is not easy, and you were never meant to figure it out alone. That is what this channel is for. I'll see you in the next one.